This is the Financially Simple Podcast, the show dedicated to destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner. The content in the show is for informational purposes only. This show is not investment advice. Instead, seek help from a competent financial advisor or conduct your own due diligence. Justin Goodbread, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Heritage Investors, a registered investment advisor only conducting business in states where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration is not an endorsement of the firm by securities regulators and does not mean the advisor has achieved a specific level of skill or ability. Here's your host, pizza-loving, certified financial planner, Justin Goodbread.
And welcome back to the Financially Simple Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Goodbread, and as you know, this is a show dedicated to today's business owner. That's right, the business owners who are in the trenches dealing with this new coronavirus. You know, the ones that are driving us crazy as we are looking at politics and the media, and man, the world's going crazy. But I don't want to talk about that today. We're actually having another guest on the podcast here to deal with that in the next couple of episodes. Today, I want to deal with one of the most popular concerns and candidly, one of the biggest frustrations business owners face. And so to deal with this very tough topic, I've reached out to one of my long-term friends, Paula Harriss, and she's joining us today from East Tennessee as well. How are you, Miss Paula?
I am doing well. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I've been following you. You're just doing amazing things in the years we've known each other. My goodness, how much you've grown.
We've been blessed, haven't we?
Yes, we have. We both have. Yes.
So Paula's an expert in one particular area that I want to pull out of her mind. Now, she's an expert in a lot of things, folks. Her resume speaks for itself, and we're going to direct you to her particular website and her particular business toward the end of this. But Paula, before we turn on the recorder today, we were talking about this number one problem that business owners often deal with, and I'm going to sum it up in the one word, leadership. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And as we spoke, over 75% of my coaching right now seems to be about leadership. So there's so many challenges in the workforce with teams. So I agree with you 100%.
Now, one of the things that I often see as a business owner and working with business owners is there's a difference between leadership and management. There's a very distinct difference. And oftentimes, candidly speaking, many of us who are business owners, we didn't go to school to learn how to be a business owner. We went to school to learn a trade. So let's today kind of dive through the distinctions between leadership and management. And let's see if we can unpack, if you will, peel the onion back on this idea of what it takes to be a true leader. Is that fair for today's conversation?
Yes, absolutely. I think the definition of leadership to me, just to keep it simple, is leadership is about the people and management is about the task. And I see a lot of companies will promote someone to a leader or a manager because they're good at selling something or they're good with the customers or the patients, but they're not really good at leading people. And I think we get very confused with the management side of constantly pushing the task, and then those tasks aren't implemented. And then what do? We continue to push the task, and we say it over and over and over in our meetings. We send out memos, and then there's this huge frustration of why isn't this being done? We've been clear, it's in writing, everybody signed off on it, and it's still not happening.
You know, oftentimes whenever I see that, it comes down to the fact that I feel, maybe my feelings are not correct, and I'm probably more of a manager type personality. I don't consider myself to be a strong leader, and that surprises people, but I often see that people just don't want to do something. If you ask them to do something, it's like, man, they just don't want to do it. Am I misreading something there on that?
No, you are absolutely right. You know, leadership is about being a servant and people development. And this is a part that we totally miss. We just think we're supposed to be here to get the production going, and we are. And then sometimes we pull our boss card, which doesn't always help the situation. Sometimes you have to. But there's something I teach called the 5 levels of commitment. And the first level of commitment is I don't want to. So you're absolutely right. And that means I'm here for my paycheck. I'm committed to my paycheck. So we have to have that conversation with our team. And so the 5 levels real quickly are I don't want to, I want the results, but I don't want to work for it. I might do it if you meet conditions for me, or I did my best, which still leaves room. You know, Winston Churchill said, it's no good to do our best. We have to do what's necessary. And so that 5th level is whatever it takes.
So I guess that begs the question from my mind is how do you And I know this could be a very deep rabbit hole, so I don't want to dive too deep into it. And I know that you have things like this in your own work, in your own business, and your own communications out there. But how do you move somebody from maybe a level 2 to a level 5, from the I want results but don't want to work for it, to how do you get somebody to that whatever it takes position?
Well, that is absolutely an important point that a lot of leaders do not have in their toolbox. And I get those calls all the time. I had one yesterday, and I call it a 5-step conversation. Sometimes the team doesn't believe in what we're doing, and they keep saying, yeah, they're signing off on everything we're giving them, but they don't really believe in it. So we have to go back to the why. And we also have to have a 5-step conversation. So I'm going to give you those steps real quickly. I have a video on that. I have a handout on it if somebody wants it. Happy to share. The 5 steps are, number 1, start where you can agree. Find something you can agree with for that team member. And then the second step is to list your facts. And this is Wall Street Journal, not National Enquirer. List facts.
Right, I understand.
And dates, times, people, whatever. Step 3 is share how you feel about that. I'm frustrated. Use I words, not you words. You words are attacking. I words are, I'm frustrated. I don't understand. Frustration is a big thing to share with people and let them know this isn't working. That's another good one to say. And then sometimes it's appropriate to have an apology of like, have I done something to cause you to lose respect for me? And sometimes you have.
Right.
Then step 4 is, if you were in my shoes, how would you handle this? We want to shift to incorporating them into the solution. Step 5 is let's follow up. And if this is still happening, schedule your next meeting. And if you were me as the leader, how would you handle it then? So you set up your consequences.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. I want to go through the steps one more time in rapid order, if you will, Paula. Just step 1 through 5, one more time, if you don't mind.
1 is start where you can agree. 2 is list the facts. 3 is share your feelings about those facts or an apology if necessary. Step 4 is what are your ideas for solutions? Step 5 is let's follow up. And if this is still happening, what do we do?
Okay, as a leader, and as a leader in your business, as a leader in my business, and as individuals who consult or work with tons of leaders nationally, which one of those steps is often the one that we fail as leaders to address properly?
Step 5.
The follow-up position.
Yes. It takes all the courage we can get to go through this conversation one time, and then we think we're done. And then we just don't have the nerve. We just dread these conversations. It's much easier to talk about the task than go into this level of a conversation as a leader.
If step 5 is where we often fall apart at as leaders, after this type of a very kind of candid, rough conversation, how fast should we have our follow-up? Is that we're talking a day after? We're talking a week? We're talking months, a quarter? Where do you typically see
That's a good question. I think it really depends on the situation. Sometimes it's 2 weeks. Sometimes it's a month. Typically no longer than a month. Now, once a quarter, we need to be having a check-in conversation. I have a system for performance reviews that I talk about, and having a relationship one-on-one once a quarter, everyone on the team doing that is a really good idea.
Okay, so let's change from first gear to second gear. We just talked about I don't want to, or they don't want to. And so from a leader's perspective, we might often say, hey, the team doesn't want to do this. Another one that I often hear is they don't believe in, I've heard they don't believe in the mission. They don't believe in my values. It's that they don't believe in. How do we address that particular point?
That's a good question because I get that a lot. And sometimes the team won't tell you that. This comes up in the dental world a lot for following protocols. And I like to start with why. So this is a purpose conversation.
Okay.
So if they're stuck on a system that they're not implementing and they don't believe in it, maybe we need to take a back step and go into why are we doing this in the first place? Why is this important to implement and get some buy-in at the why level?
So Simon Sinek wrote a great book on Start With Why. I'm sure you read that. Yeah, it's an outstanding book. That's one that I recommend business owners read. And he does a great job on that particular purpose. So without trying to dwell on that, how do you deal with the lack of confidence then? Lack of confidence within the team or within their own abilities or within the leadership or wherever it is?
This happens more often than not. Actually, the low self-esteem, so many things. And I've been through a lot of personal struggles myself and sought a lot of counseling. And Many times I have a quote that I say, personal growth precedes professional growth. So this is, as Maxwell would say, the fourth level of leadership, which is personal development. And I think if we're just managing, we're missing this step. Self-esteem is a huge topic. I won't go into that here. But one thing that I see lacking in a lot of offices is a training program.
Right.
Sometimes we throw people in. And one thing I'm seeing about the younger generation is they like levels. They grew up playing video games and they're always working for the next level. And sometimes in our businesses, we don't have levels and we're not evaluating where they are. They don't have a checklist for training. They're not assigned to anyone. We just kind of throw them in. So I think a personal improvement plan, a PIP, one company I used to coach called it that. I think it was great. And then appreciate and acknowledge their success. And I think there's three levels in the training. First is they've been introduced to it. Second is they're practicing it. Third level is they're mastering it. And we need to acknowledge each of those three levels.
That goes back to an old statement that I heard years ago that everything rises and falls on leadership, which is kind of the ethos of our conversation today. And candidly speaking, as a business owner, and I'm sure you experience the same thing, is that we're spinning so many plates oftentimes that developing the training program falls on yet another plate that we have to spin. And candidly speaking, I know I've been guilty of this. I know the business owners who will listen to this will agree with probably you and I in this area that, man, that just often doesn't seem like a high priority for me to develop a training program. I got to ask you, Paula, is it really, really that important to develop a training program?
I think it is, but I don't think the leader has to do all of that. And I think that segues right into our next point of sometimes the team doesn't follow your systems and don't implement because they weren't part of creating it. Let's take, for example, you're trying to write as a leader, you're trying to write the system for phone skills when you've never worked up there. You've never answered phones. That doesn't make sense.
Right.
So why not incorporate your best team players and say, what are your systems that you use for the phone skills? Let's research. Let's find some other resources. Let's get some training on this, and then we'll write our system according to our purpose and vision.
One of the things that we work on in the early phases with clients is the strategic plan, so much so that we actually created a course on Financially Simple around strategic planning. Yep. And you just nailed down a particular point that we have found is powerful. Maxwell, as you mentioned his name earlier, John Maxwell, for those of you who don't know that name, he's written several books. He's a great leadership coach. I think, Paul, you're one of his, don't you have a credential with him?
Yes, I am.
What's that credential that you possess?
I'm one of his founding coaching team members.
Wow, that's amazing. So John Maxwell, he's written a lot of things on leadership. And one of the things he teaches, which is what you just identified, is that you have to empower the team. And in doing the strategic plan, you often can, as you said, have the person who's answering the phones write out their systems, and therefore you're not having to create the actual education process. And if you allow them to create the system, am I correct then that they now have ownership of the system and ownership of the results and consequences?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm seeing this shift with a leader right now that's going through something, and it's amazing to watch. Once he shared the vision and then empowered his team, delegating and empowering are a little bit different. Delegating can be giving orders. Empowering is, here's what I want to see happen. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that. I need your help. And then you make the final decision. They put something together, they present it to you, and you say yay or nay.
You're listening to the Financially Simple Podcast. Show your support by subscribing to this and our other educational business channels at financiallysimple.com.
Okay, so help me personally with something here, Paula. Oftentimes I have seen in my own business where I'll empower somebody and try to coach with I often say, I've got so much information in my head, and I think many business owners can say that. We're running at warp speed, and we're seeing different things than the team members seeing them in their micro silo or their own peripheral. We're seeing a bigger view, almost like the panoramic view versus a microscopic view of the situation. Mm-hmm. And they'll put something together, and then we notice a position on there, a particular point that could cause problems in another area that they perhaps didn't see or didn't know.
Oh, that's a great question.
What's the best way then for a business owner or the leader of the company or the department to be able to not, I cut my days to say, don't deflate the balloon, don't pop the balloon, but empower them yet again with additional information. How would you coach me, let's say, if I were in that position of empowerment, but also see problems? How could I communicate that without deflating that team member's balloon, so to speak?
So what I usually suggest for this, I mean, you're going to have your department meetings. Hopefully everyone's having meetings. If you're not having meetings, there's part of your problem. Okay. But there are different levels of meetings. So your departments may meet, and you're exactly right. They'll come up with some ideas and a system that will affect another department. So I suggest a core meeting. I call it a core meeting, okay, where you might have your departments meet, but then you have one representative from each department who gets together and meet as sort of a core group or a leadership team. And so they're sharing, we thought we might try this. Oh, well, how's that going to affect us over here? Oh, well, I hadn't even thought of that. Oh my gosh, that's a good point. So let's work together on how we can resolve that. And this becomes a mastermind. And the mastermind definition that I got from Think and Grow Rich is where two or three are gathered in harmony, keyword, right, harmony. You have the third mind, the God mind, the mastermind. Right. So you want your team to feel free to share with each other. And so sometimes I share a permission statement. Do I have your permission to share with you everything I see? Yes. And then how we move forward with that is up to you. Let me know. Give me some feedback on how this might affect you. I'd like to know. So when we start with that, it opens up everything for a mastermind discussion instead of ownership. This becomes interdependent.
I love that. I love the framework of permission statement. I love the framework of mastermind. And I think it's interesting. You just quoted Think and Grow Rich is one of my top 5 books I read every year.
Yeah.
I love Napoleon Hill's work. And for those of you who haven't got tired of me yet mentioning that, if you haven't read Think and Grow Rich yet, shame on you. Go read the book. It's unbelievable. It gives you a lot of wisdom as business owner, especially in the leadership area. And you mentioned another series of meetings there. I'm making the assumption that you've read or implemented the book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And that's where you're pulling some of those meeting concepts together. Am I correct on that?
Well, not necessarily a meeting concept from there, but there is some of that mentioned. And there I actually wrote a study guide for dental practices for that book. And actually, I read Think and Grow Rich backwards one year. So
that's awesome.
6 goes to fear, you know. So the meeting structure that I propose is depending on the size of your business, so the size of your practice, you have group meetings as a whole. Let's say in a month time, maybe you have one meeting in the month that's a whole team meeting. If it's a smaller group, meet once a week. You might have your morning huddle to kick off the day, but then you're going to meet once a week with an agenda and people are assigned their topic. Then if you have a leadership team, that core group, they can be meeting during the month with your departments. The leader doesn't have to be there unless desired. And then that leadership team will come back to the leader. And so you'll have that core group meeting with the leader and share what they've been discussing.
Let me ask you a question. Something that I've seen, and I've actually implemented this in our own practice, is that I'm of the opinion, I want to see if you share my belief or challenge me in my belief. I'm of the opinion that the business owner oftentimes should not be conducting the meeting.
Correct.
Any meeting
Correct.
for that matter.
Absolutely. Please don't.
Yeah. So you're moving that down to maybe a practice manager, an office manager, a business manager, maybe a department head, whoever it is in the business. But you're trying to get away from the owner having to do everything. And the easiest way to do that is for them not to appear, quote, in charge of daily operations. And am I correct? Am I thinking in that?
Yes, you are. Please do it that way, because if you want an empowered team and if you want a team that is partnering with you, you know, they say you're not a leader if no one's following.
Right.
And if you're doing all the pushing, then it's not working. And this is where we get discouraged and we stop and we sit there in the meetings and we're the only one talking and the team's not participating. I hear this all the time. And I'm like, okay, give it up. You may not even need to be at this meeting. You have assignments. You have a clear agenda that you have approved in advance. And you can have one person leading, or you can have one person being the moderator and 3 or 4 other people have reports. This is a key thing in meetings is follow-up. If you've assigned someone and you have SMART goals, I'm not sure if everyone knows what that is, but it's an acronym.
We've covered that. Yep, we've covered that in detail on the show.
Very good, very good. So if you have SMART goals, you're getting the person who's accountable for that particular project to give a report in your meeting. So this becomes a group mastermind conversation, not just one person.
So, Paula, after going through those 5 points, we live in East Tennessee, the famous place where someone will look at you and smile and say yes, but in the back of their head, they're going to say, there ain't no way in God's green earth I'm going to do that. I call that the sabotager of a business, right?
Yes.
I was giving an example to a group of business owners about a ship. I grew up on the coast, as you well know, and I love boating. And oftentimes in the boating world, you have things that go overboard, like an anchor, or I've showed a particular video of a mast that had fallen off of a clipper ship, and it was causing as a sea anchor, causing the boat to move down. And ultimately, there has to be, I call it maybe sabotage, maybe that individual who's there just to stir the pot. How in the world do you deal with that?
Well, that's the person I call the leaky life preserver.
Okay.
I hear this frequently. Oh, well, he or she is so good with her skills. We just can't lose this person. And that is such a deception many times, because I do eagles and turkeys, so you've got an eagle team member, and the eagles get frustrated that the turkey is constantly tolerated, and your eagles will leave if you don't deal with that turkey. So what you have to do there is understand the different personality styles. You have to understand the backstory. Why are they sabotaging? This is back to that 5-step conversation. And then we have to have some consequences. There has to be a balance of rewards and consequences. You've heard this saying, what gets rewarded gets repeated. But then sometimes the rewards aren't working, and we have to have a mastermind about consequences, which can be a group exercise as long as you're within the laws, the HR laws.
I read a note the other day. I think it goes handedly with this. It says, nothing will kill a great employee faster than watching you tolerate a bad one. That Harry Bleacher actually wrote that. Yes. I think that's what you're saying there. So let's say you go through that mastermind there again, and candidly, the Eagles all know who the turkey is in the business. Yeah. It's not just the business owner who knows that. So after you go through the mastermind, did I hear you correct to say that it may work, and that's a big may, it may work best if we get the mastermind group together, or the team or the department together, to address behavioral issues, including those turkeys in the conversation. And then once the team comes up with a solution, after that point, if again that turkey, using your word, does not move into the right perspective, at that point you have to deal with the thing that all of us hate to deal with at that point. That is, termination or whatever else, correction processes, etc. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, you are. Here's what you don't want to do. Don't repeat the same thing. Let's say a system isn't being followed and you keep talking about it in the meeting. Now, let's everyone remember to use this form. If you keep doing that, you're losing respect. Do you want your team to like you or respect you? Right. Most people say respect. So we all know who it is. So we start with one-on-one. So let's say we got an admin department and those two people are not getting along, and there's one person who's not following systems and it's bugging the other person. That person tends to come to the business owner, leader, doctor, and say, I'm just so tired of her. And the first thing the doctors do is go, okay, I'll talk to her. No, that's triangulation. So you coach that team member who has the problem to go to that person and have a conversation with them. And the first thing you want to ask them is say, have you talked to her yet about it? You're equipped. You know how to have the conversation. It may be the 5-step we went over earlier. Right. And come back and report to me and let me know how it went. Sometimes they've had the conversation. It didn't go well. They need a mediator.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be the leader. I've done lots of those myself. Right. And then final straw, we've got to get the boss involved. Yes. But always the people who are affected are in the room. Don't be triangulated. You know what I mean when I say that?
Yes, I'm with you on triangulation. So that leads me to one last question then on this thought process. And it's probably the heaviest question I'll ask you is, how do you recommend the business owner make the decision for termination or removal? At what point do they actually come to that conclusion?
That's a tough one. It really is. I think if we have done our part, we've had our communication, we've done evaluations. You would not believe how many people do not do evaluations. And they're building a case on someone, but that person has no idea about it. So we have to communicate. If we've had an effective training program, if we've addressed things quickly, we didn't let them build, nip it in the bud, as Barney Fife used to say.
Right, exactly.
And we've written things up. We've followed our protocol in the manual. Be surprised how many people don't have an up-to-date personnel manual.
Right.
And the team member is fully aware that when we're doing our follow-up in step 5 of that 5-step conversation, the next meeting, my job is on the line. Then it's time to make that decision.
That's a tough one, isn't it? It's never easy.
It is very tough. But there's lots of prep. There's lots of warning. There's lots of discussion. And it should be no surprise.
That's correct. Okay. So we covered a lot of information today in this 30 minutes, Paula. You've been like, man, what a wealth of knowledge. What are some closing remarks? Your golden nuggets is often called them. What would be those closing remarks that you like to leave on the business owners?
Well, thank you for asking me that. There are so many. It's really hard to pull it into a couple things, but I would say, remember that share the vision, empower the team, and have the final decision. That's a huge, huge help for everyone to remember those 3 steps. The difference in leadership in management, as we've been discussing this whole time. And here's a statement that I learned from my mentor. It's always do what you ought to do, when you ought to do it, whether you want to or not, with no debate.
Sound like my mama. Paula, you sound like my mama. But my dad used to say, son, his life is simple. It's yes sir, no sir, no excuse, sir. My mom would say, son, you just do what's right. And if you delay, then you're disobeying. It's not a mama, Paula. Come on. I have my mama preaching to me right now.
Well, I'm a mother of 5 and a grandmother of 12. So
I know that. So, yeah. Paula, you've been a blessing to me personally. I've learned some things, as always, like such a wealth of wisdom. How could the listeners learn more about you? Where could they go to find information about you, et cetera?
Well, thank you, Justin. I appreciate you very much and what you stand for and how many people you've helped. You're really a whiz and so smart and humble at the same time. Appreciate that. So they're welcome to text me. My number is 865-679-2728. And I do have an email address, which is paulaharrisscoaching@gmail.com. And my last name is spelled kind of funny. It's 2 R's and 2 S's. My website is also paulaharrisscoaching.com. And I have 2 domains, so if you spell it with 1 S, it'll get me.
So let me spell that out then. PaulaHarriss coaching.com. Did I get that right?
That's correct. You got it.
All right, friends. So we're going to put all that information inside the show notes, and whether you're on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, any of I think we're on every channel out there now that you can listen to a podcast. Check out the show notes. You can go to Paula's website. You'll find out, if you haven't already seen, why I love this dear woman and why she has helped me personally over the years, and how I've seen her help tons of business owners with her wisdom and her leadership skills. You know, being a leader is very difficult for us all.
Yes.
And I was reading the Bible the other day, Paul, and just some of the leaders in the Bible. I think about Moses in particular, and God wanted him to get the Israelites out of the land of Egypt. And he's like, Lord, not me. Send my brother. Send everybody else, not me. And ultimately, he ended up being an amazing leader. That's oftentimes we find ourselves in a leader position. So I think the wisdom as you share with us today is impactful. And friends, I'll tell you, like I always say, life is hard. It is. Being a leader, it can be difficult. Life is hard, but man, life is good. We serve a good God. He opens the windows of heaven for us. Life is good. Life can be frustrating. Look, business and money, it doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Paula, thank you so much for being on the show today. I can't wait to hear the results from this particular podcast. It's one of my favorite ones I've done here recently. So thank you so much for being here with us. Friends, remember to go out and make it. Got to make it. Go out and make it a great day. Y'all take care.
You've been listening to the Financially Simple Podcast. For more business and personal financial help and information, head over to financiallysimple.com today.